Honestly, I had passed through Hyde Park Corner countless times before I realized that this house belonged to the Duke of Wellington, the man who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. At first, Apsley House seems like exactly what you would expect, the grand London home of a national hero. But once I went inside, I began to realize that this house was never simply a place for Wellington to enjoy his success. Apsley House once had a rather grand nickname, Number 1 London. In the 19th century, it was one of the first important houses travelers encountered when entering London from the west. Today, the experience feels almost completely reversed. Countless people pass through Hyde Park Corner every day. Most simply cross the road and head straight into the park. Unless someone pointed out, you might never notice that a house like this is standing right beside you. But in Wellington's lifetime, its location could hardly have been more prominent. This was not only somewhere to live, it was also where Wellington received royalty, politicians, diplomats, and other distinguished guests. And once I stepped inside, what caught my attention was not simply what Wellington had chosen to collect for himself. It was another category of object that kept appearing. They all seemed to carry the same word. Presented by a king, presented by a country, presented by a city. At first, I did not think much of it. Waterloo was not Wellington's victory alone. It had been won by Allied forces with decisive help from the Prussians. So why did so many countries choose to honor Wellington personally? They were not ordinary medals or souvenirs. When porcelain service came from King Frederick William III of Prussia, its pieces are decorated with views of Prussian palaces, cities, and landscapes. It feels like a king bringing an image of his own country into Wellington's home. Another service has an even stranger history. The Egyptian service was reportedly commissioned by Napoleon and intended as a gift for Josephine. But after changing hands several times, it eventually came into the possession of the restored French king Louis XVIII. Louis then presented this object from Napoleon's world to the man who had defeated him. Nearby, the king's letter to Wellington is still preserved. The gift here to acknowledge that Wellington had become an important symbol of the new European order that followed Napoleon's defeat. In the early 19th century, diplomacy was often personal. Kings honored individuals directly, while cities, merchants, and bankers used gifts to express gratitude, loyalty, or political support. But that made another object in the house even more puzzling. If this collection celebrated Wellington's triumph, why was a statue of Napoleon standing in one of the most prominent positions in the house? The story begins with Napoleon himself. Napoleon had commissioned it himself from Antonio Canova, who portrayed him as Mars, the Roman god of war. He apparently disliked the result. After Napoleon's defeat, the sculpture came into British hands and was eventually given to Wellington by the Prince Regent. A general who had defeated Napoleon now had a monumental sculpture of his rival inside his own home. Its position may have been practical. The staircase was apparently the only place large enough to hold it. But the effect was still striking. Was it simply a work of art or an unavoidable reminder of exactly who Wellington had defeated? Upstairs, another side of Apsley House begins to emerge. These were not simply living spaces, but state rooms used for formal entertaining. The people who entered them included members of the royal family, aristocrats, military officers, politicians, and diplomats. This was not a collection arranged for the general public. This was seen by some of the most powerful people in Britain and Europe. The displays today do not reproduce exactly how every room looked during Wellington's lifetime. But the house still preserved the language of his public identity. Portraits, military honors, diplomatic gifts, and image connected with Waterloo and victory. It is a very different kind of spectacle from the Royal Pavilion in Brighton. According to Princess Leven, Wellington reportedly said after visiting the Royal Pavilion, "Devil take me, I think I must have got into bad company." The Royal Pavilion expressed luxury through exotic fantasy. Apsley House did it through diplomacy, military achievement, and art. And nowhere did Wellington's private collection and public identity come together more clearly than in the Waterloo Gallery. He had the Waterloo Gallery created to display his growing collection of paintings. Among its most significant works is a group known as the Spanish Gift. These paintings had been taken from the Spanish royal collection by French forces before being intercepted by Wellington's army. Wellington offered to return them, but the Spanish king ultimately decided to present them to him instead. So the paintings on these walls are not simply works of art. They also reflect Wellington's connections with war, Allied powers, and the royal houses of Europe. But the gallery was not only a place to display paintings, it was also the setting for the annual Waterloo Banquet, where former officers, politicians, and distinguished guests gathered to commemorate the victory. Around then, hung paintings recovered during the war. On the table stood monumental silver pieces presented by Portugal, and downstairs, beside the staircase, was Canova's statue of Napoleon. Waterloo was therefore remembered here not through a single monument, but through the paintings, the objects, the guests, and the banquet itself. Apsley House remained Wellington's private home, but on the evening like this, it also became a stage where his victory, his alliances, and his place in post-war Europe were brought together. After leaving Apsley House, I kept thinking about one striking contrast. Today, Wellington Arch dominates Hyde Park Corner, yet the house where Wellington actually lived and where his identity was presented to some of the most powerful people in Europe sits quietly beside it. Some of the objects inside represented honor, some represented diplomacy, others were simply the result of gift-giving amongst the European elites. But once gathered in the same house, they preserve more than Wellington's private life. And Wellington may not have been merely a passive recipient of what the house had come to represent. He expanded it for entertaining, kept many of the gifts and works of art he acquired, and later made provisions to preserve key parts of the collection as family heirlooms. Seen in that context, a statue of Napoleon begins to feel less like an anomaly. If Apsley House preserved the world created by Waterloo, then the figure of Napoleon could hardly be absent. Without Napoleon, there would have been no Waterloo. And without Waterloo, there would be no Wellington as we understand him today. What survives here then is not simply the home of one famous man. It is a house in which private success, diplomatic recognition, and national victory gradually became almost impossible to separate.